Tommy the Serpent, Riley, Marcus Red-Eye Hayes, and Lena Ghost Carter ruled Liverpool's streets with fear, blood and power. Tonight, we uncover the secrets they left behind, the hidden deals, the brutal killings, and the empire that thrived in the shadows. This is the story of the Red Vipers, a gang that turned the city into their kingdom of terror. Liverpool's waterfront has always been a place of contrasts. By day, the docks bustle with activity, cargo cranes lift containers, ships unload goods, and the city hums with the rhythm of trade. But by night, the bright lights and busy streets hide something far darker. Shadows stretch across the warehouses, and the smell of salt water mixes with smoke and oil. It is here, in these quiet, dimly lit corners, that the city's underworld thrives. The docks are no longer just a place for commerce, they have become the heart of fear. The locals speak cautiously about the nights when the docks come alive with whispers. There is a new gang in town, and they operate like ghosts. They move silently, leaving only faint traces of their presence. Shipping containers that seem ordinary are often hiding contraband, drugs, weapons, sometimes even the bodies of those who dared to oppose them. For the ordinary citizen, it is almost impossible to know where safety ends and danger begins. Streetlights flicker over empty roads, and even the bravest pedestrian can feel the tension in the air, as if the city itself is holding its breath. Law enforcement patrols the area, but the gang has become unpredictable, almost untouchable. The police find themselves chasing shadows, following leads that vanish as quickly as they appear. Surveillance cameras mysteriously malfunction. Evidence disappears, and witnesses who come forward are suddenly silenced, either through fear or by the gang's ruthless intervention. The balance of power is shifting, and it is clear that the streets are no longer governed by law or order. Liverpool is learning the hard way that some rules are meant to be broken, and some threats are invisible until it is too late. Every alleyway, every docked ship, every abandoned warehouse seems to carry a story, an unspoken warning for those who wander too close. Rumors spread quickly, a deal gone wrong, a man gone missing, a shipment intercepted and destroyed in the night. People whisper about the gang's leader, a shadowy figure no one has ever seen, whose orders are carried out with precision and violence. Even among criminals, respect and fear collide. Nobody knows his face, but everyone knows the consequences of crossing him. As the nights grow darker, the docks transform from a place of trade into a stage of terror. The hum of machinery fades, replaced by the echo of footsteps that vanish around corners, the occasional bark of a dog in the distance, and the ever-present feeling that someone is watching. The city's pulse slows, as if it senses that these streets are no longer safe for ordinary life. Neighborhoods near the docks are slowly changing, families stay indoors after sunset, children stop playing etching, and the sound of laughter is replaced by silence. In the midst of all this, the gang continues to expand its influence. Small businesses become silent participants in their schemes, either out of fear or bribery. The docks are no longer just a physical place, they are a symbol of control. And for Liverpool, the realization is clear: the shadows over the docks are more than darkness, they are the beginning of a reign of terror, one that will shape the city in ways nobody could have imagined. The stage is set, and the first act of fear is only just beginning. The gang that had begun to haunt Liverpool's docks soon revealed itself as more than a mere collection of street criminals. They called themselves the Red Vipers, a name whispered with a mixture of fear and awe in the city's backstreets. Their rise was swift, almost impossible to trace. At first, they were subtle, taking control of local betting shops, corner stores and late-night pubs. Their presence seemed harmless at first glance. A familiar face behind the counter, a quiet enforcer at the door, but beneath the surface they were laying the foundations of a ruthless empire. It didn't take long for the Red Vipers to make their warning known. Anyone who challenged their authority found a small red snake sticker left in plain sight, a silent message that their power was absolute. The city quickly learned the language of fear. Residents stopped reporting crimes, store owners locked their doors earlier than usual, and the streets emptied at night. Liverpool had become a city under siege, not through overt attacks alone, but through the constant, invisible weight of intimidation. The gang's tactics were precise. They didn't need to strike loudly, the threat alone was enough to bend the city to their will. The Vipers' members were unpredictable, yet disciplined. They moved with purpose, each action calculated to expand control while avoiding unnecessary exposure. Every job, every heist, every act of violence was meticulously planned. Intelligence flowed within their ranks like blood, and outsiders attempting to interfere found themselves trapped in a web they couldn't see. Police raids came and went, but the gang always seemed a step ahead, leaving behind false evidence or disappearing entirely before authorities arrived. Liverpool's law enforcement realized that they were not dealing with ordinary criminals. They were facing a sophisticated machine built on fear, loyalty, and secrecy. The streets of Liverpool began to feel the gang's grip in subtle, almost invisible ways. Shopkeepers were forced to pay protection money, and those who refused often vanished, leaving behind empty homes or burned-out buildings as warnings. The Red Vipers infiltrated local businesses, politicians, and even police channels, ensuring that their influence reached further than anyone could measure. The gang's power was not only in their violence, but at their ability to make others act without ever showing themselves. Fear became their tool, control became their currency, and silence became the law. Despite their growing notoriety, the Red Vipers remained enigmatic. Their leaders were faceless figures, their identities hidden behind layers of secrecy. Rumors swirled about their backgrounds: former dock workers, ex-soldiers, and those who had risen from the city's most broken neighborhoods. Their story was Liverpool's story, a mirror reflecting the inequality, desperation, and ambition that thrived in the shadows. Every act of violence, every whispered threat, and every symbol of their dominance told a single, unchanging message. The Red Vipers were in charge, and anyone who doubted them would pay the price. By the time the city began to fully comprehend their reach, it was already too late. Neighborhoods had changed, alliances had shifted, and a culture of fear had taken root. The Red Vipers had not only taken control of Liverpool's streets, they had reshaped the city itself. The docks, the alleys, and even the brightest neighborhoods carried the weight of their influence. For Liverpool, the rise of the Red Vipers was not just a criminal story, it was a transformation, a reminder that power once claimed rarely retreats quietly, and that fear can be as dangerous as bloodshed. The streets of Liverpool began to change in ways that could no longer be ignored. What had once been ordinary neighborhoods filled with the sounds of children playing and late-night chatter were now silent under a heavy shadow. The Red Vipers' rise was no longer a story of intimidation, it had become a trail of blood. Random, brutal killings started appearing across the city, leaving behind a chilling signature that confirmed the gang's control. Entire blocks were forced into silence, their residents too frightened to step outside after dark. Every corner, every alleyway seemed hide danger. The violence was precise, almost surgical. Rival gang members were targeted one by one, their deaths public and symbolic, leaving the message that opposition would be crushed without mercy. Yet the attacks were not limited to the criminal world. Innocent bystanders, caught in the wrong place at the wrong time, became unwilling witnesses to the Vipers' reign. The streets themselves seemed to bleed as the gang demonstrated, again and again, that no one was untouchable. Fear spread faster than the news. Whispers traveled through pubs, laundromats, and even the city's quietest homes. The Red Vipers were no longer just a gang, they were a force that Liverpool could neither predict nor escape. The police struggled to keep up. Investigators discovered crime scenes that defied logic. CCTV cameras inexplicably malfunctioned, key evidence vanished, and witnesses who attempted to speak were suddenly missing. Some disappeared completely, never to be found, while others turned up days later, traumatized and unwilling to recount what they had seen. Every attempted arrest seemed to fail, leaving detectives frustrated and helpless. It became clear that the Vipers had access to intelligence and resources far beyond a typical street gang. They were always one step ahead, orchestrating events with an almost frightening precision. The city's citizens watched in fear as their neighborhoods became chessboards of violence. Storefronts were smashed as warnings, cars torched, blood left on pavements as grim reminders of what happened when one dared to defy the gang. The Red Viper's signature red snake stickers became synonymous with terror. Seeing one posted on a door or wall was enough to send residents fleeing or locking themselves indoors. No one could predict who would be next, and the uncertainty itself became a weapon. Every shadow carried a threat, every knock on the door a potential danger. Liverpool was learning that fear could be just as deadly as bullets. Amid this terror, the gang's power grew stronger. They thrived, not only on violence but on the control it bought them. The streets, once alive with laughter and community, now belonged to them. Rival factions were eliminated, and any remaining pockets of resistance were swiftly subdued. The Red Vipers were no longer a name spoken in whispers. They were the unseen rulers of Liverpool's nights. Every murder, every display of brutality reinforced their dominance, ensuring that the city would remember their presence long after the blood had dried. By the end of this wave of violence, Liverpool had been transformed. The streets ran with fear, the city's heartbeat slowed, and a chilling understanding settled in. The Red Vipers had turned fear into power, and power into an invisible, unstoppable force. The city could not fight them openly, and the people learned that survival often meant silence. Blood on the pavement was no longer an accident. It was a warning, a lesson carved into the very heart of Liverpool, one that the city would never forget. Behind the chaos of the streets, the Red Vipers were building something far more sinister than anyone could see. Their power was no longer measured only by fear and violence. It was measured in wealth, control, and the invisible threads that ran through the city. While the public saw only the blood and terror, the gang operated a vast network of illegal dealings that extended deep into Liverpool's core. Drug shipments moved through hidden warehouses, concealed under ordinary cargo, while weapons were smuggled across the city with precision and care. Every transaction was calculated, every shipment carefully guarded. The streets were their theater, but the real game was being played in the shadows. Luxury cars became a common sight late at night, transporting bundles of cash, drugs, and contraband, while the gang's leaders remained faceless, their presence almost mythical. The Vipers had perfected the art of invisibility, allowing the city to tremble without ever seeing their faces. Investigators occasionally discovered traces of their operations, but raids always seemed one step behind. Containers were emptied before authorities could intervene, warehouses appeared abandoned only to be used again within hours, and those who attempted to infiltrate the gang were quickly removed from the picture. The Red Vipers had transformed from a violent street gang into a sophisticated city-wide criminal empire. What made them particularly dangerous was their ability to manipulate not just the streets, but the institutions around them. Local businesses were subtly coerced into compliance, their cooperation ensured through fear or incentives. Politicians and law enforcement officials, either unaware or unwilling, became part of the system the gang exploited. Even those with the best intentions found themselves compromised, entangled in a web that made the Vipers' power nearly untouchable. Their influence was pervasive, invisible, and nearly impossible to counter. The city's residents lived under this unspoken control, often unaware of just how deeply it had taken root. The gang's operations were not only lucrative, they were intelligent. Every shipment, every deal, every act of violence was part of a larger plan. They adapted quickly to threats, exploited weaknesses, and learned from every mistake. Liverpool's streets became a chessboard, and the Red Vipers always 3 moves ahead. Rival gangs found themselves eliminated systematically, not out of anger but to maintain control. Every act of aggression, every whisper of betrayal, was measured for its long-term impact. Ordinary citizens were caught in the crossfire, their lives reduced to caution and fear, reminders of how power, when exercised without restraint, reshapes an entire city. As the city slept, the Vipers' empire thrived. Warehouses hummed with activity long after the sun had set, and money flowed unseen through bank accounts, businesses, and back alleys. Their power was silent but absolute, a presence felt rather than seen. Liverpool had become a city of two worlds, the visible one of families, markets, and lights, and the hidden one of control, crime, and shadows. The streets no longer belonged to the people. They belonged to the gang, who had learned that true power is not in open confrontation but in manipulation, fear, and secrecy. The Red Vipers were no longer just a gang, they were the invisible rulers of Liverpool, shaping the city in ways that were deadly, permanent, and nearly impossible to stop. Even the most powerful organizations are vulnerable from within, and for the Red Vipers, that vulnerability came in the form of betrayal. Loyalty had been their greatest weapon, but it was also their most fragile. One of their rising members, ambitious and restless, began secretly working with an outsider, a member of a rival gang from East Liverpool. What started as small, seemingly harmless exchanges of information quickly escalated into sabotage. Operations that were once executed flawlessly began to falter. Shipments went missing, and the gang's carefully maintained order started to crack. The betrayal sent shockwaves through the Vipers' ranks. Trust, once absolute, became fragile and suspect. Members questioned one another, alliances wavered, and suspicion hung over every meeting. The gang had built its empire on fear, but now fear turned inward. The streets, which had previously belonged to them, seemed less secure as whispers of the insider's treachery spread. The Red Vipers realized that their most dangerous enemy was no longer outside the gang, it was among them. The consequences were swift and brutal. A high-ranking member, suspected of leaking information, was executed in a manner designed to send a clear message. The city woke to a shocking scene. The man's body displayed in a public place, a single red snake sticker left nearby. A symbol that betrayal would never be tolerated. But even as the gang punished one traitor, the underlying tension remained. The insider continued to act in secret, sending fragments of critical information to rivals and law enforcement, creating confusion and mistrust within the Vipers' empire. The betrayal exposed a truth the gang had long ignored. Power could be threatened from within as easily as from outside. For the first time, their control over Liverpool's streets was questioned. Operations slowed, rival gangs took advantage of the confusion, and law enforcement observed with cautious optimism as cracks appeared in the Vipers' armor. Yet the gang adapted quickly. Leaders implemented stricter rules, monitored every movement, and reinforced the loyalty of those they trusted most. Punishment became a tool not just for discipline but for survival, a reminder that the Red Vipers would not tolerate weakness in any form. This internal conflict changed the dynamics of the gang entirely. Decisions that had once been decisive and confident now carried the weight of suspicion. Members acted with extreme caution, aware that any misstep could be fatal. The streets of Liverpool, once ruled by unchallenged fear, now witnessed a different kind of tension, uncertainty within the gang itself. Citizens sensed the shift, though few understood its full significance, and the city remained a dangerous place where the line between predator and prey blurred. Ultimately, the Red Vipers survived the betrayal, but they were forever changed. The experience hardened them, sharpened their instincts, and reinforced the lesson that loyalty was the most valuable and most fragile currency of all. For Liverpool, it was a stark reminder that even the most feared powers are vulnerable to internal strife, and that the cost of betrayal is paid in blood, silence, and an unrelenting vigilance that never ceases. The streets continued to pulse with danger, but beneath the fear lay a new tension, the knowledge that trust, once broken, leaves a city even more unpredictable and deadly. The city of Liverpool had endured years of fear, but finally, a response began to take shape. Authorities realized that conventional policing was no longer enough. The Red Vipers had grown too powerful, too clever, and too invisible. A special task force was formed, pulling the city's best detectives, surveillance experts, and undercover agents into one coordinated effort. Their mission was clear: infiltrate the gang, uncover their operations, and dismantle the empire that had terrorized the streets for far too long. The city watched cautiously, hoping that justice could finally break the grip of fear. The investigation was unlike anything the police had attempted before. Surveillance cameras were placed across critical points, informants were routed from the fringes of the criminal world, and digital tracing became a primary tool in tracking the gang's movements. Every shipment, every transfer of money, every unexplained disappearance was scrutinized. Slowly, fragments of the Red Viper's empire began to emerge. Investigators discovered hidden warehouses, coded messages and secret routes used to transport narcotics and weapons across the city. Yet for every discovery, there seemed to be an immediate countermeasure. The gang's leaders were always one step ahead, vanishing before raids could be executed, and leaving false trails that misled law enforcement at every turn. The city's residents began to notice subtle changes. Police presence increased, and detectives moved through neighborhoods with cautious determination. But the Viper's reach remained pervasive. Small businesses, previously coerced into compliance, continued to operate under the gang's invisible control, and rival factions still feared retaliation. The streets remained tense, as if aware that a storm was approaching but unsure when it would strike. Liverpool's citizens were caught between hope and dread, watching the slow, dangerous dance between law and crime unfold around them. Despite these challenges, the task force persisted. Undercover officers embedded themselves in the gang's operations, risking their lives to gather crucial intelligence. Each mission carried the potential for exposure, and failure meant death. Slowly, the investigators pieced together a map of the Red Viper's influence. From the docks to hidden warehouses and secret meeting places, they began to understand the gang's methods. The way orders were transmitted silently, how fear controlled compliance, and how every act of violence reinforced their authority. It became clear that dismantling the Vipers would require precision, patience, and a willingness to navigate the darkness the gang had created. The tension reached a tipping point as the task force prepared for coordinated raids. Plans were drawn in secrecy, timing was calculated to the minute, and every detail was scrutinized. The streets held their breath. For the first time, the Red Vipers faced the possibility of being outmaneuvered. Yet the gang remained a ghost, their leaders unseen, their presence looming like a shadow over every operation. The city braced itself for the inevitable confrontation, knowing that the battle between law and fear was about to escalate in ways that would leave a permanent mark on Liverpool. The stage was set for a showdown that the city had never witnessed. The Red Vipers, long untouchable, were finally in the crosshairs of a relentless force. But even with all the preparation, the outcome remained uncertain. Fear still thrived in the shadows, and the streets of Liverpool held secrets that not even the police could fully uncover. The war for the city's soul was far from over, and every move from here on out would shape the future of its streets in ways that no one could yet imagine. The night that changed Liverpool arrived without warning, cloaked in an uneasy calm that made the streets feel even more alive with danger. Rumors had spread for days that the Red Vipers would convene in a hidden warehouse on the outskirts of the city, a secret meeting that could decide the fate of their empire. Law enforcement had mobilized, coordinating a high-stakes operation to strike at the heart of the gang. At the same time, rival factions, aware of the gathering, moved into position, ready to exploit any weakness. The city, unaware of the approaching storm, slept as tension built like a coiled spring. As the night deepened, the quiet was shattered by the sounds of chaos. Explosions rocked the warehouse district, flames lighting up the darkened sky. Gunfire echoed through the streets, bouncing off brick walls and sending neighbors running for cover. The Red Vipers were caught in a crossfire they had not anticipated, their carefully constructed empire suddenly vulnerable. Members fled through back alleys, abandoning vehicles and shipments, while law enforcement pursued with calculated precision. The streets became a battlefield, a violent theater where survival depended on speed, instinct, and luck. Amid the chaos, the gang's leaders disappeared. They were shadows within shadows, moving unseen through hidden passages and back routes that even the authorities could not trace. The task force seized the opportunity to capture high-ranking members, but the masterminds behind the Viper's reign vanished without a trace, leaving the city with only fragments of answers. The streets, once carefully controlled by fear, now resembled a war zone. Fires burned, abandoned cars smoldered, and debris littered the pavements. Liverpool had never witnessed violence on such a scale, and the impact would reverberate through the city for weeks, months, even years. The aftermath was a mix of triumph and uncertainty. While the arrests and seizures dealt a blow to the Red Vipers, the absence of their key leaders left a dangerous vacuum. Rival gangs scrambled to fill the gap, while remaining Viper members reorganized and disappeared into the shadows. Liverpool's residents emerged from hiding cautiously, surveying the destruction and trying to piece together what had occurred. Fear had been shaken, but not erased. The streets were quiet, but the sense of unease lingered like smoke from the fires that had burned the night before. For law enforcement, the night represented both victory and frustration. They had struck at the heart of a criminal empire, but the elusive leaders remained untouchable. The Red Vipers had been weakened, yes, but their influence lingered, a reminder that power is not always tied to visibility. Every captured member, every seized shipment, every cleared street was a small step toward justice, yet the true architects of terror had vanished into the darkness, leaving the city to wonder when, or if, they would return. Liverpool had been forever changed. The night had exposed the fragility of control, the unpredictability of violence, and the persistent shadow of fear that could never fully be eliminated. The Red Vipers were no longer untouchable, but they had proven that even in chaos, a well-trained, disciplined gang could disappear like ghosts, leaving only questions, scars, and the knowledge that the streets of Liverpool would never feel completely safe again. The city had survived, but the memory of that night, of blood, fire, and smoke on the pavement, would haunt it for generations to come. The city of Liverpool had endured the chaos, the bloodshed, and the terror, yet the streets still bore the weight of what had occurred. The Red Vipers' reign of fear had been challenged, their operations disrupted, and many members arrested or eliminated. But even with their empire fractured, the gang's presence lingered like a shadow over the city. Neighborhoods had been reshaped by the violence, families had been forced into hiding, and trust between citizens and law enforcement had been deeply shaken. Fear was no longer just an emotion, it had become woven into the very fabric of the streets. The legacy of the Red Vipers was not measured solely by their crimes, but by the way they changed the city itself. Liverpool had been forced to confront its vulnerabilities, to recognize that power could thrive in silence as easily as in bloodshed. Ordinary citizens who had once taken the city's safety for granted now lived with caution and vigilance. Small businesses, once targets of extortion, had either closed or learned to operate under the shadow of potential danger. Even those who had never encountered the gang directly felt the invisible weight of their influence. The streets had been claimed, not through permanent occupation, but through fear and memory, a psychological hold that persisted long after the fires had been extinguished and the sirens had faded. Yet amidst the fear, there was a cautious hope. Law enforcement had learned valuable lessons from the ordeal, developing strategies and alliances that would strengthen their ability to respond to threats in the future. Communities, though scarred, began to rebuild, reclaiming spaces that had once been abandoned or avoided. Citizens spoke openly of the need for vigilance, for solidarity, and for ensuring that power never again slipped into the hands of those who thrive on fear. Liverpool had survived, but it had done so with a new awareness of the fragility of order and the cost of silence. The Red Vipers themselves had disappeared from public view, leaving behind an empire in ruins and a reputation that would outlive them. Their leaders had vanished like ghosts, leaving open questions about whether they were truly gone or merely waiting for the right moment to return. Stories of their influence, their brutality, and their cunning became part of the city's lore, whispered in alleys, pubs, and homes. The snake sticker that once marked their crimes became a symbol not just of fear but of the lessons learned about loyalty, betrayal, and the price of unchecked ambition. Liverpool's streets, once battlegrounds, were now silent witnesses to a history written in blood and shadows. The city had endured, and life slowly returned to a cautious rhythm. Yet the story of the Red Vipers remained a stark reminder that fear can survive even when its source disappears. Power does not always vanish with the fall of a gang, it lingers in the memories of those who lived through it, in the scars left on buildings, in the quiet hesitation of a city learning to trust again. The story of the Red Vipers was not just about crime, it was about Liverpool itself, a city shaped by struggle, survival, and a constant balance between fear and courage. The streets of fear and power had been tested, and while the city had survived, it would never forget the nights of bloodshed or the invisible grip of a gang that once ruled through terror alone. In Liverpool, the shadows remain, and the lessons endure. Power is fleeting, fear is enduring, and the memory of the streets cannot easily be erased.